On this Monday night, Justin Trudeau's government in crisis. Chrystia Freeland's shocking resignation hours before she was set to unveil Canada's latest economic plan. Why she's jumped ship from cabinet, pushing the Liberals into damage control.
It's a feminist government.
Plus, the devastating political blows to the Prime Minister. What are his next steps as he faces fresh calls to step down?
Justin Trudeau has lost control.
I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to resign.
And Canada Post workers ordered back to work. What it means for the holidays as labor frustrations linger.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with a stunning blow to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government. Trudeau has spoken at a fundraising event in Ottawa for the first time since the surprise cabinet withdrawal of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland this morning, triggering fresh calls for him to step down. He didn't directly address Freeland's resignation, which sparked the biggest test of his political career. Trudeau only saying today has been an eventful but not easy day and repeated how much he loves this country.
I trust Canadians. There is no place I'd rather be than Canada, and it is the absolute privilege of my life to serve as your Prime Minister.
Freeland resigned just hours before she was set to deliver an economic update. In a letter, she said resigning from the cabinet was her only honest and viable path. We have team coverage tonight looking at what this means for Trudeau, his minority government, and the country. We begin with Chief Political Correspondent David Akin in Ottawa. David, new Finance Minister was sworn in this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely, Neetu. He is Dominic LeBlanc. He is one of the Prime Minister's most trusted advisors. He becomes the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Public Safety. That was his old job. Right behind me, what you're seeing is after that swearing in, there was an emergency caucus meeting of Liberal MPs. Closed door in that room. We're on Parliament Hill, just across from West Block. Cabinet ministers and MPs are leaving now. They're being scrummed by reporters behind me. I almost said Minister Freeland, of course. It's MP Chrystia Freeland attended that particular caucus meeting, and when she went in, she got a standing ovation. But this has been some kind of day here, Neetu, and how we got from A to B. I've never seen anything like it in 20 years of reporting on Parliament Hill.
Prime Minister, good morning.
Justin Trudeau had nothing to say on his way into a scheduled cabinet meeting. Moments earlier, he had just learned that his Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, was resigning.
We have to be candid.
Freeland announced her decision to quit on social media. She noted that the Prime Minister had offered her another job in cabinet, but after a weekend to think about it, she said she'd rather quit. For the past number of weeks, she wrote in her resignation letter to the PM, you and I have found ourselves at odds about the best path forward for Canada. Indeed, sources inside the caucus tell Global News Freeland was pleading for more fiscal restraint. She did not like the GST holiday just announced and was arguing strongly against the government plan to send Canadians GST rebate checks worth $250. She called that, quote, a costly political gimmick, end quote. Her sudden resignation caught her colleagues by complete surprise.
This news has hit me really hard, and I'll reserve further comment until I have time to process it.
In her resignation letter, Freeland said the threat from Donald Trump of a 25% tariff made fiscal restraint, or less spending, imperative. It is this conviction, she wrote, which has driven my strenuous efforts this fall to manage our spending in ways that will give us the flexibility we will need to meet the serious challenges presented by the United States.
Any comment on Chrystia Freeland's resignation?
That cabinet meeting was scheduled for 2 hours, but it stretched to 3, then 4 hours and more. Finally, Freeland's replacement was named and quickly sworn in at Rideau Hall.
I, Dominic LeBlanc, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear.
Dominic LeBlanc is one of Trudeau's closest political allies. He will be keeping the current job he has, Minister of Public Safety, in addition to Minister of Finance.
My conversation with the Prime Minister today was entirely focused on the work that we want to do to support Canadians around affordability, obviously the threat of tariffs coming from an incoming administration and what we need to do to protect the Canadian economy.
But Freeland's resignation and the manner of it has reopened some political wounds within the Liberal caucus. Some of those Liberal MPs who called for Trudeau to resign weeks ago renewed those calls today. Cabinet ministers, quizzed about the caucus unity issue, tried to change the topic.
The moment now is for us to focus on the best interest of Canadians.
And Freeland wasn't even the only cabinet minister to quit today. So did Sean Fraser, the Nova Scotia MP, who was the infrastructure and housing minister. He said he decided not to run in the next election to spend more time with his kids.
Now, as for Chrystia Freeland, she is out of cabinet, but she's not going anywhere. She's staying in her seat. It's a Toronto seat, and she plans to run in the next general election. Neithu.
What a day, David. So this puts the Prime Minister's future in question. What are the possible next steps for Trudeau and this government?
That is exactly what they were talking about in that meeting, what MPs are being asked about. They're not saying much. The caucus, the Liberals need time. There's going to be a 6-week Christmas break, but they need maybe more time to reorganize, redraw up the cabinet. Maybe the Prime Minister prorogues. The Prime Minister could also decide to announce his intention to step down, and then he'd prorogue and say until a new Liberal leader is chosen, that's when Parliament will come back.
All right, David Akin, thanks. Let's bring in our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson, now. Mercedes, what can you tell us about what was happening behind the scenes and what Trudeau might be thinking?
Well, Neithu, I've been speaking to some senior sources, and two of them who are close to Justin Trudeau tell me that the Prime Minister is not in a resignation mindset, that he was intent to sit and meet with caucus today, just as he met with Cabinet earlier today, but that the Prime Minister at this point is not looking to resign. Now, keep in mind, this is a situation that is literally changing minute by minute as the day unfolds. As David mentioned, we don't know if there might be more resignations from cabinet ministers who are unhappy. We keep hearing that there are 2 ministers, we don't know who they are, who are possibilities that that could unfold with. We don't know what happened in that caucus meeting just now either. So there's still a lot of questions ahead, but the brain trust around the Prime Minister is very small, and he only talks to certain people about this. So while he may have heard Cabinet and caucus's concerns, when it comes to determining who he's taking seriously, we're talking his chief of staff, his deputy chief of staff, very few other people, and I'm told that they are increasingly in a bunker mentality.
Okay, and now the power rests with the NDP, and they could trigger a confidence vote. What happens if they do? Would the government survive?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the first question is, how would the Bloc vote? Because if both the Bloc and the NDP collapse, the government goes down. Jagmeet Singh came out today and sort of said this odd thing where he called for Justin Trudeau to resign, but he wouldn't say whether that meant he'd lost confidence in the government and therefore would vote against them in a confidence vote. Listen to what he had to say.
Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are focused on themselves. They're fighting themselves instead of fighting for Canadians. And for that reason, today I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. He has to go.
And of course, Pierre Poilievre jumping on that, saying that if Jagmeet Singh doesn't have faith anymore in Justin Trudeau, he should bring down the government.
Because we simply cannot go on like this. And it is up to Jagmeet Singh now to make that realization. Mr. Trudeau is being held in office by one man, Jagmeet Singh.
Neithu, the wild card here in part in a minority government, as we see increasing discontent from the Liberals and NDP, is how those MPs will vote regardless of how their leaders vote in a caucus vote. So certainly something to keep an eye on as a busy week continues to unfold.
Yeah, important consideration there. All right, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes. With Freeland's sudden resignation from the finance minister position, she obviously didn't table the government's fall economic statement today as planned. Liberal House Leader Karina Gould ended up doing that. And as Mackenzie Gray reports, the mini budget is painting a less than stellar picture of the government's finances.
It was tabled with a whimper. No speech, no photo op. The Liberals having nothing to say about their fall economic statement after its author, Chrystia Freeland's shock early morning resignation, which left finance officials unsure if it was even going to be tabled. But when it was, it painted a grim picture of the country's finances. The deficit ballooning to nearly $62 billion, up dramatically from an estimated $40 billion in this spring's budget, thanks in part to $24.2 billion in newly announced spending. The most notable, $1.3 billion for the Canadian Border Services Agency and the RCMP to help secure the border, addressing a key demand from Donald Trump to avoid the 25% tariff. The RCMP getting an additional $600 million to move forward with a gun buyback program and billions to attract new AI and business investment.
On the spending side, that's a lack of discipline. It's an inability to control the spending. It's an inability to manage the affairs of the government.
One thing not accounted for, the $250 checks the Liberals promised would go out to 18.7 million Canadians just weeks ago, something Freeland seemed to label as one of the costly political gimmicks that led to a resignation.
It's a big deficit, high spending, high debt fall economic statement. It's one where the federal government just seems to have lost control of the purse strings.
Other measures announced by the Liberals, putting Terry Fox on the $5 bill, exploring allowing long-term mortgages, and implementing automatic tax filing with the CRA. Neithu?
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mackenzie. Let's turn now to a meeting of provincial and territorial leaders which took place in Toronto today. The premiers focused on responding to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's threat to slap tariffs on Canadian exports unless Canada ramps up border security. Freeland's resignation threw a major wrench into Canada's response. Colin D'Mello joins me now. Colin?
Well, Neithu, Freeland's shock resignation came right in the middle of this meeting. She had actually called Ontario Premier Doug Ford to speak with him about the resignation. He put her on speakerphone so she could address all of Canada's premiers. The big question on their mind now is who is going to take the Canadian message to the United States? Under the shadow of Donald Trump's tariff threats came an urgent meeting between Canada's premiers, all trying to determine what they can put on the table to avoid economic disaster.
It will affect our entire country, these tariffs. Make no mistake about it.
But even Trump was quickly overshadowed by the news of Chrystia Freeland's sudden resignation as federal finance minister, leading to calls for premiers to put on a strong front.
It's chaos right now up in Ottawa, and it's time that what we do every single day, the premiers, we step up and we'll make sure that we tell the world that there is stability here.
Freeland was the premier's main point of contact with the federal government. Her absence now raises questions about the response. Ottawa is responsible for tariffs and border security. Premiers say the way forward is in doubt.
I would say that the premiers at this table offer the continuity in being able to maintain that pressure.
While the premiers have agreed to travel to Washington in February to put pressure on American lawmakers as a bloc, the meeting resulted in little else. Ontario's threat of cutting off electricity exports are not being matched by other provinces. All, though, are considering their levers in the worst-case scenario.
The goal for the engagement that Saskatchewan's putting forward is for us to not have tariffs implemented on January the 20th, and if they are, for the very shortest period of time possible.
And as for the uncertainty in Ottawa, premiers refuse to weigh in.
This is his decision and his decision alone to make. He has earned the right to make that decision.
Premiers are now plotting out their next steps, unsure of who is going to lead the charge.
And with that uncertainty, Colin, how can the premier show a united front in the face of Trump's tariff threat when there's such dysfunction in the federal government?
Well, the premiers need to say they're all on the same page because they want to project unity in the face of what this dysfunction is happening in Ottawa. The premiers say that they are trying to tell their American neighbors to the south if there is a vacuum of leadership in Ottawa, that they are happy to fill it. 13 premiers are slated to go down to Washington in February to not only talk about tariffs, but also pitch to Congress this conversation about the North American Free Trade Agreement, now known as CUSMA. That will be renegotiated in 2026, and Congress will have to ratify this. So this is a battle on two fronts that premiers are fighting. But behind all of this, there is a bit of fissures in these relationships. You'll remember Ontario has threatened to cut off power, electricity supply that would feed 1.5 million Americans if this escalates. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith told me today she wants Ontario's Premier to walk back that talk, suggesting it's dangerous rhetoric. Neithu.
All right, Colin D'Mello in Toronto. Thanks, Colin. Potentially thousands fear dead in a French territory. Coming up, the destructive storm that hammered the archipelago of Mayotte. There are fears several hundred people, possibly thousands, are dead after a powerful cyclone pummeled the French territory of Mayotte over the weekend. It's being described as the worst storm to hit the region in a century. Mayotte, an archipelago, is located in the Indian Ocean between Madagascar and Mozambique. France has deployed its military and says it's sending tons of aid by air and by sea. Mike Armstrong reports.
This is downtown in Mayotte's capital, with damage in every direction. The man filming is a musician showing what Cyclone Trudeau left of his neighborhood. Every tree on Main Street has been knocked over, and boats in the harbor have been tossed like discarded toys. He says this is the place people would come to listen to music, to forget about their problems. Mayotte was already a place with enough problems. It's the poorest of all French overseas territories, home to about 320,000 people. About a third are unemployed, while many are now also without homes. 70 emergency shelters have been set up, and about 100,000 people have moved in. Cyclone Trudeau hit Mayotte Saturday morning with winds of more than 220 kilometers an hour, the equivalent of a Category 4 hurricane. This meteorologist says Trudeau was small but intense and made a direct hit. He says if there'd been just a small shift in its trajectory, it would have been less catastrophic. Survivor John Bellows says he spent the storm thinking he was going to die. Most have spent the days since not moving much. Roads are closed, he says, and food and supplies are needed desperately. Nearly everything is broken, he says. The French foreign minister visited the island Monday and says it's been devastated. Many on Mayotte lived in shanty towns, in structures that basically didn't stand a chance. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Claims he never planned to leave Syria. Ahead, the first public comments attributed to Bashar al-Assad since the fall of his regime. Israeli airstrikes hit air defenses and missile depots in Syria overnight. It's part of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's bid to disable Syria's military capabilities following the toppling of the Assad regime by rebel forces just over a week ago. Assad appears to have issued his first statement since fleeing to Russia. In the letter, Assad asserts he did not intend to leave Syria and claims he was airlifted out by Russian forces. Redmond Shannon reports.
The man who led the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad, Ahmed al-Sharaa, says he wants international sanctions to be dropped, and the West seems eager to engage.
We have sent a delegation of senior UK officials to Damascus.
Also tasked a European top diplomat in Syria to go to Damascus.
Assad himself had not been seen or heard from since he fled to Russia. Until Monday, the Telegram account for the Syrian presidency posted a statement supposedly from him. In it, he claims he never wished to flee Syria. It says as Damascus was falling on December 8th, Assad headed north to an airbase operated by Russian forces. The statement says upon arrival, it became clear that our forces had completely withdrawn. Attacks increased on the base when the letter states Russia ordered a full evacuation. It adds, at no point during these events did I consider stepping down or seeking refuge. Reacting to the statement, this Damascus woman says Assad abandoned his people a long time ago when he starved them, imprisoned them and killed them. At a Monday defense meeting, Russia's Vladimir Putin made no mention of Assad or Syria. His soon-to-be US counterpart said this about pressuring Putin to give up Assad.
Well, I hadn't thought of it. I think we have to get on with our lives. We'll have to see what happens.
On Monday, the Kremlin said no decision has been made about the future of its military bases in Syria. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Next, the strike is set to end, but will Postal Service resume in time for Christmas? Canada Post says mail will begin moving tomorrow after a month-long strike by its workers. But with less than 2 weeks until Christmas, even Santa himself would struggle to clear the backlog in time. Heather Urex-West reports.
Just limited hours on Christmas Eve, but we were open till 3 p.m.
For retailers, it's the most wonderful time of the year. Calgary's Mountain Culture is busy selling holiday gifts both in store and online.
We're about 35% of our sales are online, maybe 40% during November and December.
So when Canada Post workers went on strike last month, this business knew it had to pivot quickly.
They kind of forced all the businesses to go out there and try to find alternative shipping platforms like we did. And hey, we discovered that we can get even better rates through someone else.
While the potential end of the Canada Post strike here is being met with a shrug, for anyone waiting on mail, the news is long overdue.
It's a good thing for sure. Some documents are stuck in Canada Post, so I guess I will have them as soon as possible.
85,000 passports and other essential documents have been in limbo during the strike. After nearly a month, the catch-up is expected to take some time, so don't expect anything mailed Tuesday to be delivered by Christmas.
It'll be a busy day. There'll be a lot of backlog in that, and it'll be a lot of work for us.
On picket lines across the country Monday, the anger and frustration was clear.
Pretty upset with the government and the corporation.
55,000 employees have been ordered back to work, but only until their existing contracts expire this spring.
They've effectively kicked the can down the road in a certain sense. And then we could very well be back in a strike position as of May 22nd.
Setting the stage for all of this to happen again, which might feel a little more like Groundhog Day than Christmas. Heather Urex-West, Global News, Calgary.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada are the Christmas lights at Lafarge Lake in Coquitlam, BC. Thanks so much for watching.